Welcome back from the break, everyone. I hope you were able to get some networking done or even just some socializing. Before I start, quick show of hands. How many of you, because of a new job or a new title, or you haven't been into work, or it's in some box somewhere, didn't bring or don't have a business card? Quite a bit. Okay, this is a cachet event. Absolutely cachet. These are the best people around. Find something to write on, not the linens, but find something to write on. Exchange your information. It's important. This is what this is now all about, being in person. It's just so lovely to be here in person and at work again. The board is a new place for me. And to see so many people who are committed to making our strong region stronger is inspiring. The work that I've seen, even in my short time at the board, how the communities have come together across the business and worker communities is absolutely amazing. My name is Lindsay Broadhead, and I am the Senior Vice President of Communications and Public Affairs here at the board. So let's start this session with a few statistics. In March 2020, employment among women aged 25 to 54 years fell by 293,200 jobs, more than twice the decrease amongst men. And recovery of jobs has been slower for women. Women exited the workforce at 2.5 times the rate of men during COVID. And 1 in 4 women have considered stepping back from their careers due to the pandemic. We also know that this has disproportionately impacted our BIPOC populations. Unlike recessions past, it is women who bear the brunt of the current job losses. And this matters for many reasons. For our economy and business growth alone, bringing women back to the workforce and ensuring they can stay matters greatly. Industries and sectors which hold up our visitor economy, our frontline medicine, tech, construction, and industry, and our small business entrepreneurs depend on it. All facets of the economy requires the dubbed She-Session to face a mighty She-Covery, and it will take us all. This isn't just a social necessity, it is a pure and simple economic imperative. Before we continue with our panel, I invite you all to answer our poll. For those joining us virtually, you can access the poll by clicking on the Q&A polling tab on your screen. For those of you joining us in person, instructions on how to answer the poll are on your table. The poll asks, what do you perceive to be the most significant opportunity to support the Toronto region's She-Covery? I'll be sharing the results at the end of the session. Now, allow me to introduce our panel moderator, Supriya Davetti. Supriya is Senior Counsel at Enterprise and previously was a talk radio show host and campaign advisor. I've had the pleasure to work with her and call her a friend. She's one of those rare people who can bring media pizzazz, scientific insights, and formidable litigation skills. Or in other words, she can school you in most every subject and then go on TV and talk about it with ease. It's both impressive and a little scary. Most importantly, she is fiercely funny. Please welcome Supriya onto our stage.
Thank you for that shout out, Lindsay. Before we begin our panel, I wanted to make a few points. The first and most important point is that, yes, we are clearly going back to normal, but the before times weren't exactly wonderful. We need to do better than normal, which means creating a work environment where people feel like they can balance their lives and stay for the long term. It's also clear that there's a bit of a generational divide when it comes to workplace expectations. Some people believe that young people are entitled, even geriatric millennials like myself. But maybe younger people are simply demanding some flexibility and balance in their lives, which is pretty reasonable. In previous generations, there was a clear delineation between your professional life and your personal life. Now, in the age of 24/7 connectedness, that balance and that delineation is consistently and regularly blurred. And balance is something that workers need to fight for. We even see that in our legislation, with Ontario's recent recognition of the right to disconnect. which prohibits employers from penalizing workers for not replying to communications outside of regular working hours. All these factors contextualize the fight for gender equity. The fight for balance and flexibility can't be divorced from the fight for women, because women are often expected to juggle competing priorities in a way that men simply are not. Women shouldn't be defined by motherhood, but we can't ignore that motherhood is an important force in many women's lives. When women are penalized for taking maternity leave or for juggling their careers along with parenting duties, that's unjust. Yeah, we can narrowly target these issues, but fostering a wider, all-encompassing culture of empathy is crucial too, which is why the ideas explored today matter so much. The She-Covery is a collective and focused effort on the part of employers, government, and other talent ecosystem players to ensure that the systemic barriers that held women back in the workforce, even in the before times, are broken down. Beyond just a direct response to the She Session, a She-Covery requires new ways of both thinking and acting. It's not enough to ensure that women simply recover post-pandemic. We need to respond to the pre-pandemic realities that were holding women in the back in the workplace from the start. As we return to normal, it will be important for employers to preserve the lessons they learned from the pandemic. Employers learn to be more sensitive to workers' needs, but old habits die hard. We must keep an eye out for backsliding while acknowledging just how difficult it can be to permanently reshape the workplace culture embedded in any organization. Now, with all that being said, let's start our panel discussion. Allow me to introduce you to the inspiring women today. First, we have Sonia Mathur, the Managing Director of Human Potential at Accenture. Come on up. Up next, we have Sloan Muldoon, Senior Vice President of Retail Performance for Canadian Branch Banking at Scotiabank. And joining us virtually, we have Rola Dagger, Global Channel Chief at Dell Technologies. And finally, we have Angelita Graham, Partner and Toronto Office Leader at Mercer Canada. Check. All right. Just making the shift here. So let's kick this off with a question to each of you. Angelita, I'll start with you, just because you're the first face I can see here on my screen. What does the She-Covery mean to each of you as senior executives and to your organizations?
So for me, thank you so much. And first of all, let me say I'm happy to be here to have this very important conversation. And if I think about the She-Recovery, to me, it really means inclusivity. So it's about inclusion. It's about making sure that we don't forget about women as we think about the recovery and planning for the recovery. We heard the statistics a few minutes ago, so most of us are aware that women were the hardest hit during the pandemic, especially in the early stages. And the industries that were hit the hardest were where women dominated. And then we had the burden, as you mentioned, of the childcare and taking care of the elderly also drove a lot of women out of the workforce, making that difficult decision to exit. So in my mind, ensuring women are not left behind is going to really take deliberate actions and policy from both employers and government. So when we bring back women into the workforce, we need to think about how can we on-ramp women back into the workforce so they are not penalized for making that temporary exit and don't have to start over in terms of their career journey. Childcare infrastructure is going to be important, and I'm so happy that Ontario has now signed onto that. And then given that the pandemic accelerated the digitalization and automation in the industry that were heavily dominated by women and other underrepresented groups, and some of those job losses may become permanent, we have to think about the retooling and the reskilling of those impacted women to make sure that they are not permanently locked out of the economic recovery and enshrine some of the already pay inequity and wealth gap that we see between women and men, which has further been expanded during the pandemic. So it's really, in my mind, taking deliberate action policies by both government and both employers in making sure that we are addressing the needs of women to make sure that they can come back into the economy.
Sonia, you want to jump in there?
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, I don't have a mic in my hand, but I just realized I'm mic'd up, so I'm good. Everybody can hear me? All right, great. I mean, I would absolutely echo everything that we all just heard here. But if I take it down to a little bit more of a human level, I think She-Covery really for me is about the workforce, my peers, my leaders understanding what it means for me to come back, right? We're talking about She-Covery here. I am acutely aware that there is a they-covery, there is a he-covery, but specifically for women, it is something very unique. And I think at the personal level, it is something very unique to that person. So as we all go back, there isn't a cookie cutter answer. There isn't a cookie cutter approach to the way that employers and to the way that employees will resonate. It is what is important to that particular person and to all of us collectively.
Sloan?
Okay, so it's great to see everybody in the room and online this morning. This too is my first larger event, so it's great to see some faces that do not have a mask on them. So, you know, She-Covery is also about confronting gendered economic impact that women-led businesses, and women-owned businesses are facing pre-pandemic and now post-pandemic. And I think it's really important that we all become part of that solution to support the She-Covery. And I don't want to repeat factoids that were shared earlier and that are well known, but I'm going to repeat them because it's an alarming trend. You know, women have left the workforce at a greater rate, and we're at a 30-year low of women in the workforce. Women-owned businesses most of them had to drastically transform their business during the pandemic. Women faced the she-cession, whether it was childcare, elder care, or other challenges, which some left the workforce, some put their business to the side. And unfortunately, women, particularly executive women, faced higher burnout rates than men. And so when you put those four trends together, that's really alarming. And that's where the Scotiabank Women Initiative can play a part. And so a little bit about the Scotiabank Women Initiative. It was founded in 2018 to support women-led businesses and women-owned businesses, not only to support them with, obviously, access to capital, education, and mentorship, but what we heard from customers and our networks was there's unconscious bias that exists for women that men don't face. There's stereotypes that women in leadership or women entrepreneurs face that men don't. And this is about trying to break down some of those stereotypes and ensure that we become part of the solution so that women-led, women-owned businesses have the same ability to build, grow, and expand their businesses as any male counterpart. So looking forward to be part of the solution going forward.
Rola?
Yeah, first of all, it's great to see everyone virtually. My first trip was last week to Austin, and I first walked into the summit with 300 people with a mask on. I didn't want to touch anybody. I didn't want to shake anyone's hands. And then 10 minutes later, everything's off. Mask is off, hugs, kisses. I think everybody was starving for that human touch. So I'm sorry I'm not there with you physically, but I will tell you, welcome to the phygital world, where it's a new word, by the way, physical and digital together. So I'm so excited to be with you. And I echo everything that everyone said. In your intro, Supriya, it's just unbelievable in terms of what you shared around especially young people and young talent. But She-Covery for me is simply she is enough. I will repeat for every woman is in the audience, those 3 words are words that you need to repeat in your head every day, that you are enough. We are enough and she is enough. To me, when I think about the She-Covery, is the power of belonging. It's the inclusive future for all, for every single woman and men in general. How do we, because I mean, today men face challenges as well because they don't know what to do and what to say sometimes because they feel uncomfortable. But to me is the power of belonging, the power of redefining expectations in the workplace when it comes to women. You know, and for me, when it comes to She-Recovery is we as women, we have to push the limit. Don't stick in your lane. Get out of your lane, get out of your comfort zone, because comfort and growth don't coexist. Be comfortable of being uncomfortable with the new world that we're coming into, because we have faced a lot. All the stats that have been used in the last 3 minutes are scary, and it's sad to see. But I will continue to say we need to continue to fight for a seat at that table. You need to bring your own chair if there is no chair around that table. And you need to continue to be open to be in a growth mindset and learn it all versus know it all in the room with everybody, in the balance. Everybody talks about the balance. And for me, it's about like work-life harmony in terms of what you love to do, and it becomes so natural. So, and if I look at us as women in terms of what I will continue to remind myself, specifically that I've been fighting for the past 18 months long COVID every day, that I didn't think I was going to make it, I would say who I am today will never determine who I can be tomorrow. So for everybody in this room, always think what tomorrow is going to bring. In turn, that struggle that we're all facing and we all came out of the COVID, turn it into the strength that we need to be. And for everybody in the room, if you want access to new talent pool, go out there and look for women who want mission orientation, who are so driven by passion and purpose to make an impact.
You know, Sloan, you touched on this a little bit, but women at different stages of their careers face different challenges. I had mentioned childcare and motherhood in my opening remarks. You mentioned elder care. And then, of course, there's retirement readiness later on. But Sonia, I'll start with you for this one. In terms of the different stages of a woman's career and how, you know, that can change in terms of their own considerations, what are some key considerations that, you know, women themselves, as well as employers, need to take into account across the evolution of a woman's career?
Yeah, so there's a lot to unpack in that, right? So, you know, I'll start with some considerations that I think as women we all have, and what I'll say right at the onset is that it isn't the same for every single woman, right? It's going to depend on what's happening in their life personally. It's going to depend on what they want for themselves professionally. It's going to depend on what's happening environmentally around them. And so if we think about those, you know, for all my HR peeps in the house, those moments that matter throughout the life cycle of a career, it's really going to be dependent on what that particular person wants. And I always go down to the individual level because I hate the peanut butter spread, right? I hate that notion that, oh, you know, we need to think about women this way, or we need to think about women that way. We need to think about humans in the way that's going to resonate with them, right? So, you know, coming back to this concept then of She-Covery, from a woman's perspective, right? What do we want as we're going back into the workforce? What have we always wanted in the workforce? We want flexibility. We want inclusivity. We want a voice. We want a seat at the table, as Rola said, and not just a seat at the table. We want a voice at that seat, at that table. We want to be able to fight back and to not have to deal with the bullying that goes on every single day in the workforce. And so when I think about coming back in and having to think about all those same things that we've always dealt with, what I would like to say is that we're all expecting change. This last 2 years, if nothing else, has taught us that we are resilient, that we can fight through things. So let's go back and create a different world in the workplace. Let's create real flexibility, real inclusivity, where women, men, everybody comes together and actually works together in a collaborative way without the speak, right? The yes, we are inclusive, we are collaborative, come join our company because we are all about that. Let's put our money where our mouths are, because that's what every single woman, I think, in this room is going to need and want, as they always have.
Angelita, I saw you nodding along there for a little bit. Wanted to jump in?
Yeah, I agreed with everything Sonia said, and then to just add another dimension to that, as Sonia went down to the individual level and say, these are the things that women want in order to advance in the workplace. When you think about it, the challenges that we run up against in the workplace, I think it's structural and somewhat systemic. Because when we think about coming into the workplace at the entry level, like women are a significant part of that workforce. But by the time you reach to the executive level, we are maybe 25% and even less in the CEO role. So really, and some of the challenges that we run up against that are impeding our career trajectory really is one of the things I think is this misalignment in terms of between genders, in terms of perception around leadership skills required to be at that top level and the influence required to be at that top level. And the viewpoint is dominated by, rightly or wrongly, it's still in our workplace dominated by that male view of leadership, which really means it impedes who get along that trajectory to that executive level that we see. So this unconscious bias and implicit bias still exists in the workforce in terms of every step of our journey along to that executive leadership level. So when I think about it and some of the considerations as we really try to move that needle, while there's stuff that we can do for ourselves, like, we need to learn to advocate more for ourselves. We get that. But really, I think to me, two of the important things is one is accessibility to sponsorship. We know that as you go up the ladder of your career trajectory, it's now more about that leadership skill, that influence of a sponsor, and everyone, male or female, who has made it to that level along your journey has had a sponsor along the way. And for us as women in the workplace, not enough leaders are sponsoring women on that journey. And studies have shown that really women and other underrepresented groups are really don't have enough sponsorship. And we know that is critical to help women in their journey because of some of the structural or systemic bias that are in the system that impact us uniquely. And so having that person who can influence and advocate for us to get some of those, call it hot jobs, or some of those jobs that can make a difference in your career advancement, because not all jobs are created equally in terms of there are some jobs that will make a difference in your career. And having that person also can also encourage us to maybe put our hand up for an opportunity when we might have stayed back in the background is going to really be important. So I think sponsorship is really key to move the needle for women, because a sponsor can really broaden your exposure, your networking, can really help to lessen that confidence gap, can really help to give you that broader perspective of maybe critical roles that you need to take on that you wouldn't have otherwise done, and be pigeonholed into a job that might not help to advance your trajectory. And then the other thing that I would want to point out is really think about those breaks. We talked earlier about how women have exited the workforce because of elder care or because of child care and coming in back into the workforce. So thinking about those breaks in women's career can really have a spiraling impact on women career advancement. We have seen it in the workplace when women come back from mat leave. Sometimes they find that their careers are stalled, not moving forward. So as we think about coming back into the workforce and the recovery, employers need to think about how can we on-ramp women back into the workforce so that their careers are not stalled, so that they are not going backwards, so that they can easily advance and continue on the trajectory that they had prior to exiting the workforce. So these are some of the things that we need to think about as we look at what can we do with regards to women. And the last point I would make is the flip side of that career break and multiple break is really the financial implication it has. Is we found that women who take a break because of child caring, really the pay equity gap widens for them relative to men who don't. And that means also the longer term impact of that is that financial wellness gap continues to widen. So these are some of the things that we need to really be deliberate about and make sure the retirement programs and plans that we're putting into place are really taking account of the diverse need of our population, our women population, and other underrepresented groups to make sure that we're looking to address some of these structural and systemic issues and biases that are in our system.
That's actually an excellent segue to my next question, and it's been said and repeated many times today. But with respect to the pandemic, it's been shown time and time again that more women exited the workforce than men did. Sloan, I'll start with you, and then Rolla, I'd like you to weigh in. What are some key considerations for employers as they look to retain their female employees, of course, but also attract new talent and new women into the workforce that may have exited, and you're trying to get them to come back?
And I'm going to answer that from the lens of a women-owned business. So what I would say is women-owned businesses were significant contributors to the Canadian economy pre-pandemic and will be even more significant post-pandemic because there's more women wanting to start their own business. Gives you some financial freedom, it gives you some flexibility. And globally, women-led businesses are growing at a faster rate than male-led businesses. So there's a real opportunity in this country to help stimulate the economy by supporting women-led entrepreneurs. But what's become really apparent during the pandemic is there's two key areas that an organization such as Scotia or other organizations will need to support the women with is what Barb referenced is the digital transformation. So if you think about through the pandemic, some of the small businesses, some of the larger businesses that you owned, of how you had to transform your businesses from being, in-store to online, finding a whole different customer base that could use your product and or services. And that has really accelerated the digital transformation for businesses. Finding ways to pay your suppliers differently than you maybe did before, finding ways to collect payment from your customers than you did before. And so what that did for us right at the launch of the pandemic is we realized that we didn't have a digital hub supporting the Scotiabank Women Initiative and our customers. So not only being able to access financial services, but being able to access educational components, being able to access other like-minded women who could become allies and help network and market their business. And so I'd invite you to take a look at the SWI Scotiabank Women Initiative Digital Hub to the number of resources that are in addition to the regular financial services provided. And the second area is access to capital. And I'll give you 3 facts that probably aren't surprising but should be repeated. Number 1, a woman would rather borrow from friends and family than come to the bank to borrow money from me, unfortunately. Number two, in Canada, they are declined for credit twice as often as a male counterpart, at 14% less, and when they are approved, 14% less than a male counterpart. And the venture capital in this country, 4% of it is allocated to women-led businesses. And so that's a narrative that we need to change collectively. And so providing access to capital, eliminating biases, eliminating stereotypes as we adjudicate is really important to be able to support women entrepreneurs and as we come out of this She-Covery. So those are the two key areas that we have found through our research and with our customers that need focus and attention.
Rola?
Yeah, I mean, great points. And as everybody talks about digital transformation, I think the biggest miss for us around transformation is and how we digitally transformed is human transformation. The last 2 years has proven that every single person that had to transform. So for me, as a technology leader, I look at technology for me is an equalizer, and it shouldn't be a division of a divide in terms of what's happening today. So I always merge technology into how does it impact human progress. And if I look at what's happening today, I'll tell you that welcome from to the world of do from anywhere, right? So where people are doing everything off the couch, be it, if you look at what happened, health tech to edutech to agri-tech, everything is tech. So to me, I look at technology in terms of the impact that needs to have on the workplace and the workforce. And what's happening today with the war on talent, and if you look at the greatest reshuffle, the greatest retention, the greatest resignation, for me, number one, as an executive, I look at providing a psychological safety in the workplace, period, full stop. When we talk about flexibility, technology, they're all amazing words, but it starts with people and culture, and it ends with people and culture, because that psychological safety in the workplace, no one wants to work for a brand anymore, especially the new generation. I have a 33-year-old daughter, and you know what? She's like, Mom, I really don't need to go back to the office because I've been more productive at home. But when you go back to the office and when you welcome people back, either virtually or physically with the new digital world, is what psychological safety do you have and what measure have you put in place in the last 2 years? Be it on mental health, be it on ERGs, employee resource groups, that if you're Black, if you're white, if you're Hispanic, if you're, doesn't matter what religion, what race you come from, I want that an inclusive, all for inclusive future for all, right? Do you have that, right? Do you have the mentality of telling your team, your people, it's okay not to be okay? We do a lot of entrance interviews, but have you ever thought about doing a mid-review just about the company when you first interview people to come in? Or an exit interview to know how people really feel and why they're leaving, right? People today are looking for a deep satisfaction and meaning in the work that they do. Women want that. My team is global. I have met no one since I started back at Dell 2 years ago. But what I met is their kids, their faces on screen. There are days where they tell me, I need to do this for my family. And I'm saying, it's okay, you can do this. Their kids coming on the screen and sitting on their lap for 2 hours while we're having a meeting. That's okay. That is a safety place that women want to work in. You want to put a load of laundry? Go run, put a load of laundry and come back. That is flexibility. And I know some women are shaking their head because we've all done it. Laundry and cooking in between. So that inclusive future for all, an equal opportunity for everyone in the work to succeed. Okay. So the biggest currency we have is our people. They're the biggest asset. We need to champion. I mean, Angelita, you talked about sponsors and mentorship. To me, a lot of people do that to check the box. Well, let me tell you, your mentor and sponsor is not to check the box. They are to get you out of your comfort zone and be ready when you when you knock on someone's door, because they want you to be a better version of you. You want to have a two-way mentorship where they can get as much from you than from them. So how do we actually get to the top? I always talk about, I learned it in life. I earned everything that I have, and it's time for me to return it back. So that learn it, earn it, return it mentality for us as executive, to send that elevator down and lift people up with us, because you do want to open that door to advance and help them. In that culture of growth mindset, it's so important, because I will tell you, in the hybrid world that we're in today, in that environment, you practice that growth mindset, because if you're not rethinking those old assumptions, you're not going to be innovating. Your team is not going to be innovating. So you want a productive, you want a healthier and a resilient workforce. Invite your people to do all of the above.
We've only got a few minutes left, and I wanted to ask each of you just really quickly, and Sonia, I'll start with you, in terms of how employers implement policies and practices. So what's your view on how employers can be held accountable and can learn from one another?
Okay, so I think that probably every employer in this room, or all the employers that we all work for, have tried to do something, right? And it all comes from a very good place. The question is, how many of our organizations are actually practicing what they preach at a broad level, right? And I say that not to call anybody out, because I think every organization is trying to do the right thing. Nobody knows what the answer is, because there isn't one answer. But I think that the way in which we need to hold all of ourselves accountable at the organization level is to truly do what we're saying that we're going to do, right? And that sounds very cliche, I know, but I'll give you an example, right? So at our company, Accenture, great company, have a table right over here in the middle of the hall here. We've socialized, we've broadcasted, we've institutionalized this concept of pace, space, grace. And that means a lot of different things for different individuals, for different people. Ultimately, the idea is to give that balance to each member of our organization, whether it's at the top or whether it's a new person that's just joined us at the very start of their career. And I think what we've potentially lost in that is what pace, space, and grace might mean to me is something very different for someone else. And so I think we all have a responsibility, each one of us, at our organizations, to take note, to understand what it is that's going to resonate with someone else, right? What does pace, space, and grace mean to you, as an example? How can I help to empower you to be able to make that a reality for your life? What can I do to help you? And it goes back to the whole concept of sponsorship. Sponsorship is not a check in the box. We each have a responsibility, whether we are a formal sponsor for someone or not, to help that person, to empower that person to grow. And it's especially important for us to do that with our fellow women, right? Whether they're peers, whether they're women on our teams. That is what's going to happen. That is what's going to give them that purpose that Angelita talked about earlier. Sorry, I think it was Rola that you spoke about earlier, that everyone, every human, every woman is looking for as they re-enter the workforce and as they newly enter the workforce. So I think that's really what's going to be the linchpin, if you will. More than the policies, it's holding all of ourselves accountable to make it happen.
Sloan?
So again, I'm going to speak from an entrepreneurial lens. So to have impactful policies and procedures, you have to, connect with your customers. You have to connect with the network and do your research, right? And make some decisions based on actually listening to the feedback. And so there was 3 themes that we're hearing in our early research, probably no surprise. Number 1 is flexibility and being able to empower me to have flexibility so I can be more productive, so that I can make my own choices, and it gives me freedom of choice, so to speak, as a business owner. Number 2, I still want to be educated, but I don't want to be educated in the traditional way of enrolling in some classes, taking some courses that require investment in my evenings. I want to be educated in ways that I can, self-select, and that there's sort of short vignettes that are able to provide me with some upskilling. And number 3, it's around allyship. So it's about allyship within my fellow or women entrepreneur network. It's about allyship from my suppliers, and it's from allyship from other successful male entrepreneurs. So what they are looking for, in addition to the mentorship, is some real allyship where everybody has one another's back, so that we can all be collectively successful.
We've only got a couple of minutes left, and I wanted to address a couple of audience questions here. So, Rolla, I'll start with you. In terms of these struggles, people don't necessarily believe that the corporate assurances, essentially, when they say you can set boundaries or you can put in that load of laundry and also, be in a meeting at the same time. How do you get folks in your organization to actually believe that what you're saying, rings true?
Great question, because I actually inspect. So a lot of us leaders could sit here and tell, we do this and we do that, but you have to inspect that mid-layer. So the best way I do it is I actually do listening committees, which is skip levels. In those skip levels, to me, are people that I choose without any of my leaders picking them and do any favoritism. And once a month, I actually go and sit with them virtually for an hour. And it's any topic of their choice that they want to talk about. It's amazing how much I hear and how much I understand. And the big one for me is I listen to understand, not listen to speak, but I also listen to action and take that information back. So one example I would tell you that I did for my team is I said that once a quarter, we're going to do a day for me, meaning that my entire organization takes a full day and they completely disconnect. The only thing that they have to do is send a picture of what they did that day. And I asked the questions. Are you seeing? And are you doing? And our leaders are actually practicing what we're preaching and what I preach. So in some cases, you'll see, listen, you're not going to get 100%, but if we get 80-20, then that's mission accomplished. But it's all about inspecting and ensuring that it's not just talking and saying that we're going to do that. It's acting to see and starting to see the impact that we're actually trying to implement.
Angelita, we're pretty tight on time, but just to get your last quick take in terms of how to get folks to actually believe that the things that the organizations are saying, ring true.
I'm sorry, you're asking.
No, I'm asking Angelita.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Oh, sorry. I didn't hear that. I think, go back to Rhoda's point, I think model behavior is one of the things for people to believe what you're saying rings through. So if I think about it, for example, with our flexibility in terms of coming back into the workplace, whereby we're saying that 2 days a week on average over time, people can come into the office and then the rest of the time work anywhere they want. We're ensuring that our leaders are modeling that behavior. So the leadership team has asked that every leader make sure no one comes in 5 days a week. Make sure you're coming in 3 or less or maximum 4, but we want to make sure we send a message to employee, it is okay to come into the office less than 5 days a week. So I think modeling behavior is key so that people can believe that what you say is what you mean.
that is all the time we have for this discussion. Thank you to everyone on the panel today for bringing your perspective, your expertise, and your knowledge to this panel. I hope to see you again at future Board of Trade events, whether on or off the stage. And I'll throw it back to Lindsay over here.
Thank you so much, Supriya, for guiding us through this critical subject. It was wonderful having you at our Transportation Summit in February and again today. Sonia, Rola, Sloan, and Angelina, I'm so glad you could be here with us, whether in person or virtually. It's leaders like you who inspire leaders of tomorrow, men and women, so thank you very much. Before we break for lunch, let's pull up our audience poll, if we could, and see how everyone responded. 42% flexible work arrangements and 30% continued remote work arrangements. So again, quite a bit of consensus with access to childcare, which is happening in Ontario, which is great.